Hello, peace be with you. In the last podcast, we spoke about the notion of freedom, and we saw that it's a very complex notion, and it has many levels, many ways of understanding it, and we also have to deal with it through concentric circles when it comes to get a deep understanding from the periphery, the outward dimension, to the inward dimension, the intimate freedom that we are talking about. And what is essential here in our understanding of this freedom is to get a sense of the different levels. This is what we saw last time, different dimensions, different levels, and there is another notion which is connected to freedom, which is also very important, and I want to talk about it today. The relationship between freedom or liberty and liberation. Freedom is a state, is where we have this impression, or the real impression, that we can do whatever we want, that we are free from our needs, from the domination around us, from the world, and we move as we want to move, with all the questions that we had in our previous discussion when it comes to, do I want what I want? Am I sure that this is me willing to do that? So these are fundamental questions. Liberation is a process. And the process is, how am I going to liberate myself from all the elements, all the dimensions, all the hindrances that are preventing me from being myself, from being the way I want to be. Now, the question here is, in this liberation process, what is essential is to get a sense that sometimes the liberation process is helping us to deal with our freedom in a better way. In fact, very often the liberation process is helping us to liberate ourselves from the illusion of liberty or freedom. So, to liberate ourselves from the illusion of freedom, it means that what is necessary here is to come to a deeper understanding of what freedom requires and the liberation process is all about. Now, as we said, we go from the periphery to the center, and now we are at the center. Now we are in our intimate life. It's in our heart, it's in our self that we are trying to liberate ourselves. And the first dimension here that we find in the mystical traditions, it's true with the Kabbalistic tradition, the Jewish mystical tradition, the Christian tradition, mystical tradition, as well as the Sufi tradition, where what is translated here, which is important in the way the scholars or the believers or the people who are trying to get, the people who are in this quest for the liberation process from going beyond the self. What are they saying? They are saying that as much as when we speak about freedom, we are talking about I do what I want. So there is a relationship between my will and my freedom. In this liberation process is to go beyond my will. So in fact, it's a level where beyond my will, without neglecting it, but going with all my consciousness, to go beyond my personal will and to experience this communion between my will and the will of God, God's will, God's decision, God's order. So this marriage between who I am, what I want, and what He wants is helping me to go beyond my will with my full consciousness, through my full consciousness, in a mindful way, just to get this relationship with the global order, with the creation, with what God wants the world to be. So this is the level where the liberation process is something which is helping me to control myself, to control my will, to harmonize, to go through this spiritual communion between my will and His will. So the mystical traditions are saying it's when I go beyond my will that I will experience this liberation, helping me to experience the true freedom. So under that, before that, at a lower level, it's the illusion of freedom that I'm experiencing, because I'm not sure that what I want is what I want, and I'm not even sure that the world around me is not directing me in one direction or in another. Now, to get this liberation, or to go through this liberation process, what is required is three features. The first one is a state where we experience something that we can call acceptance. We look at the world and we accept the world the way it is. So there is something which has to do with lucidity, it has to awareness, is to look at the world and say, okay, I accept it. And be careful, we're not talking here about fatalism, we're not talking about a determinist way, we are talking about looking at the world and say, okay, this is the way it is, and I accept what God wants, or what the order is providing me with. So acceptance is the first. The second is understanding, is I have to go beyond this acceptance and to try to understand the order, to understand what does it mean. So what is around me, it's not only a universe of elements, it's a universe of science. It's full of understanding, full of teachings. So I need to go through this intimate journey to try to get this understanding, acceptance, understanding. And just to make it clear now that it's not about fatalism, it's not about just accepting the world and being passive, is I have to work within this order. So as much as this order is good, what I can see done by human beings, my fellow human beings, is sometimes to corrupt the world, to destroy the world. So I have to add to this order the positive contribution, the added value of my presence. So acceptance, understanding, and action. Action for the good, action in a positive way. So it's not acceptance and passivity, it's acceptance, understanding, and active presence, positive presence in the world. And this is the way I'm going through this liberation process. To get what? What do I want to get through this process? And this is the final objective, the ultimate objective of the whole process. Liberation is, at the end of the day, to get this balance, this tawazun, as it is said in the Quran, tawazun, which is a balance between me and the world, between me and myself, between me and my fellow human beings. And this balance, which is also harmony, which is also the symphony, it has to do with all who I am and what I am within the world, to find my place within the world, which is not to accept the world as it is and not being active, is I find my place within the world, and my place is in the process to have a positive action, a positive presence to reach this state of peace. So there is no liberation. In fact, if we look at it, there is no freedom as a state without liberation as a process. And there is no liberation as a process without getting peace as an objective, as an end per se. Salam, peace, which is the very definition of our religion, but this is what we are all trying to get. To be at peace with oneself is to liberate myself from the illusion of freedom, to be at peace with my own ego, with my own self, to go beyond my ego, to be at peace with myself, to go beyond my will, to be at peace with the world, and to go beyond the bad presence of human beings by being at peace with the environment. So this process here between freedom, liberation, and peace is essential, and it's a dynamic between me and the world. Now, we said it has to do with accepting the order, the world order, the way it is. Yes, in a way, I have to look at the world and I have to accept the environment the way it is. So the creation the way it was created, nature the way it was set for us. Having said this, it's also a process which is I accept, but I have to try to understand the balance, the stability, and in which way the elements, nature is working, in order then to be active within this, to save and to protect the environment, for example. So it's a very deep awareness based on my human consciousness, that I have to find my place in this world to play the positive role which is necessary. It's also the way I'm dealing with time, because time, it also has to do with, the way I'm going to get old. But I have to accept that. Now, getting old is part of a natural process. How am I going to liberate myself and to remain free while I know that I'm coming close to my death? It's by accepting it. It's to try to understand the process, that with this I will get experiences, I will get wisdom, and with this wisdom I have to translate this into a positive action in the world, coming close to my death. So it has to do with space, it has to do with time, but it also has, and as I said, the concentric cycles here are coming back to me, they are bringing me back to me, where I'm dealing with my own self by trying to master my own ego. So there is no liberation without mastering my ego. It has to do with controlling, it has to do with awareness, it has to do with consciousness, it has to do with a way, once again, I will get this freedom to be who I want to be if I liberate myself of my ego, sometimes imposing into me things that are negative for me, or imposed by a dominant order, by a consumer culture, whatever. So through this, I have to master my ego, but I have also to find this balance with my own needs, with my own intelligence, my own intellect, my own mind, and my own feelings. So it's always to try to reach this balance, this harmony between who I am and what I need, my ego and the world. So by going through this, I will get this peace. So there is no peace without liberation. There is no liberation without mastering my ego, mastering my needs, understanding my feelings, getting a sense of the positive action that I have to promote or to express or to translate into the world through my life. Now, all this in the mystical tradition, in the religious traditions, is based, of course, in the relationship with God. Of course, you can get this in, we'll find in philosophies or in spiritualities without a creator. You can find these dimensions of peace and balance and liberation process. When it comes to our understanding as believers into one God, it's essential to understand here that it has to do with three things that are important. The first is always to remember that God is present. So God's presence, it's important. He's here. Wherever we are, He's here. He's also talking to us. So God's words, God's presence, God's words, and through which He's calling us to come back to Him. So His presence means wherever you go, I'm here. And wherever you go, I'm talking to you. I'm calling you. I'm calling you to go where? To come to my way, God's way. So God's presence, God's words, and God's way. This is where we understand the very meaning of the oneness of God in our life, but this relationship where I need to find my balance. I need to find the harmony between me and myself, between my consciousness and my will, between my freedom as a state and my liberation as a process, helping me to reach the state of peace, of salam, which is the ultimate state where I'm really going to experience what freedom means, because freedom means to be balanced, to experience this harmony with the self and with the world. So liberty or freedom, liberation and peace. And this is the relationship that we have with one God, the one God through His presence, understanding and accepting His presence, understanding His words and following His way. Acceptance, understanding and action. This is the ultimate goal of this liberation process. So no freedom or no liberty without liberation. And this means that in our understanding of our conception of human beings is based on dualism. And you have monism and you have, atheists who are saying, oh, there is no spirit, everything is the brain. And so the brain is everything, so they are against dualism. And you have others saying, oh, everything is in the spirit. So the dimension, the materialistic dimensions is nothing. So the most important thing in human being has to do with the spirit. So this is the big discussion between Karl Marx and Hegel. Hegel saying the spirit is the essence. Karl Marx saying materialism is the essence of everything. In the Islamic tradition, you have to deal with both. And saying, no, we are dealing with both. And whatever is the process between your spirit and your body, between the ideal dimension or the idealistic dimension and the materialistic reality, you have to try to find an harmony. And this is the same between you and the world, and the same between you and God. So sometimes you have this experience and this feeling of a communion. It's as if there is no duality, but in fact it's just for seconds, for instants. It's just in perception that, yes, there is something which is, I am reaching the ultimate harmony, I'm reaching the ultimate peace, and then you have to come back to the reality of dualism to try again the whole process. So liberation, this liberation process is a process that you will experience till the end. It's just after this that you can hope that one day you will have this perception, the reality, the real dimension of being with God in His presence. But before this, the reality of our experience is just to experience this dualism and to try to get this peace through this harmony, through the liberation process. May God help us, and don't forget, tell the people you love that you love them. Life is fragile.